Please don't let him hurt me. Those were the words my daughter typed into her phone the night everything finally shattered. I can still see the glow of my screen in the darkness of my bedroom. I can still feel the cold that moved through my chest the moment I read those words. Not panic, not rage, something older than both, something quiet, focused, and absolute. By the time I reached their house 11 minutes later, my son-in-law Marcus was face down on the living room floor with his wrist locked behind his back, and his cheek pressed against his own expensive hardwood, while two county officers pushed through the front door he'd left hanging open. He kept screaming, "She attacked me, the old woman attacked me." But the officers weren't looking at him. They were looking at me. The way I was positioned, the way I was breathing, the way my knee held him without crushing him, controlled, precise, deliberate. One of the responding officers, a woman in her early 40s with the posture of someone who'd served, stared at me for a long moment. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "were you military?" I looked straight ahead. "Retired," I said. That was all. I didn't mention the Special Operations Unit. Didn't mention the deployments. Didn't mention the years spent in places most people will never find on a map, doing things that will never appear in any public record. At 71 years old, you learn that silence is its own kind of armor. And I had worn it so long it had become invisible, even to the people closest to me. Especially to Marcus. 3 months earlier, nobody who knew our family would have believed things could arrive at this place. Especially not Marcus Reed. Marcus was 42 years old. Broad shoulders, loud laugh, the kind of man who filled a room the moment he walked into it and made sure everyone felt that. He ran a regional chain of fitness clubs along the coast, drove a black SUV with a custom grille, and carried himself like a man who had never once been told no by anyone who mattered to him. When my daughter Renee first brought him home 4 years ago, I tried hard to like him. I genuinely did. After my husband Thomas died from a heart attack 6 years earlier, Renee was everything I had left in this world that I truly lived for. When she came home that first Christmas with Marcus beside her, laughing and holding her hand, looking at her like she was something he'd won, I told myself that was love. I told myself I was being too analytical, too guarded. Maybe that was my first mistake. My name is Dorothy Ann Calloway, 71 years old, retired widow living in a quiet coastal town in Georgia where the summers are brutal, the churches are full, and people have an unspoken agreement to keep family troubles tucked behind closed doors. Most people in town know me as the silver-haired woman who walks her rescue greyhound, Biscuit, along the harbor path every morning. They see me at the Wednesday farmers market, buying fresh herbs. They see me at the library volunteering on Tuesday afternoons. They see me at the hardware store debating the merits of wood sealants with men half my age. That's all they see. And for the past 15 years since I removed my uniform for the last time, I preferred it exactly that way. I spent 28 years in United States military service, the final 11 of those years in roles I am still not at liberty to fully describe. By the time I retired, I had seen enough violence, enough consequence, enough human darkness to last 3 lifetimes. I came home wanting only one thing. Peace. Or at least I believed I had found it. The first moment I knew something was genuinely wrong inside Renee's marriage came at Easter dinner, 2 years after their wedding. Renee had spent 2 days preparing that meal. Glazed ham, deviled eggs, her grandmother's sweet potato souffle, homemade biscuits, the kind of spread Thomas used to call asterisk, a Sunday miracle. She carried it all to the table beaming, proud in that quiet way she'd always had. Marcus looked at the biscuits, picked one up, turned it over, set it back down. "You forgot to set a timer again, didn't you?" he said, not loudly, almost pleasantly. Renee's smile didn't disappear, it froze. "They're a little dark on the bottom," she said softly, "but they're still." "It's fine," he interrupted, waving his hand. "I'll eat them." Then he looked at me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. She does this every time. Brilliant woman. Cannot remember a kitchen timer to save her life. Everyone at the table chuckled politely. Renee laughed too. But I watched her hands underneath the table. They pressed flat against her thighs, fingers tight. A containment gesture. The kind of small, unconscious self-regulation you see in people who have learned to make themselves smaller when attention turns toward their mistakes. 28 years of reading human behavior in high-pressure environments taught me to notice things most people miss. Tiny signals, micro-responses, the truth that lives in the body when the face is performing something else. I started paying much closer attention after that Easter. By the following summer, I had cataloged enough to understand the general shape of what was happening, even if I didn't have every specific detail. The way Marcus corrected Renee mid-sentence in front of others. The way she apologized reflexively, for everything, for the weather, for traffic, for another person's mood. The way she laughed at jokes made at her expense with perfect, practiced timing. These were not the habits of a woman who had always been this way. I remembered my daughter at 19, strong-voiced and cert. I remembered her at 25, confident in ways that sometimes intimidated people. Whatever had carved this quieter, more careful version of her had not happened naturally. One Saturday in late July, Renee and Marcus came to my house for a cookout. I'd invited a few neighbors over, nothing elaborate. Grilled salmon, corn salad, peach iced tea. Marcus had been drinking before he arrived. I recognized it immediately, not from smell alone, from posture. A certain looseness in the jaw, a slightly exaggerated deliberateness to movement. He stood near my back porch watching me arrange the serving table, and smiled that particular smile. "Dorothy, I have to say," he announced to the small gathering, "for a retired government worker, you throw a very comfortable little party." I smiled pleasantly. "I try." "What exactly did you do again?" "Something administrative, records management." Two neighbors glanced at each other. Renee went still near the beverage table. "Something like that," I answered. Marcus laughed. "See, that's what I love about you, very mysterious, very secretive." He paused for theatrical effect. "Renee's convinced you were some kind of covert operative." More laughter from him, expectant, baiting. "I keep telling her, sweetheart, your mother filed paperwork for 20 years and made it sound exciting." The backyard went quiet in that particular way that means everyone heard, and no one knows what to do. I turned and picked up the serving tongs. "The salmon's almost ready," I said. No irritation, no defensiveness, no visible reaction at all. That frustrated him more than anything else I could have said. Men like Marcus require reaction the way fires require oxygen. Without it, they feel themselves diminishing. 20 minutes later, Renee slipped inside with me under the pretense of finding a serving platter. The moment the screen door closed behind us, she touched my arm. "I'm sorry about what he said." I looked at her carefully in the kitchen light. There was a mark on her forearm, oval-shaped, yellowish-green at the edges, old enough to be fading, new enough to still be visible. "Renee." She pulled her sleeve down immediately. "It's nothing, Mom." "Renee, look at me." She looked at the window instead. "Please don't." That word, please, soft and exhausted and terrified. Not the asterisk please asterisk of a woman protecting her privacy. The please asterisk of a woman who had learned that drawing attention to certain things made them worse. I didn't push further that afternoon, but I understood. That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet, I sat in my study for a long time with only the lamp on and biscuit curled across my feet. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, beneath old photographs and Thomas's watch, was a small leather notebook I hadn't opened in years. Inside it were a series of codes, simple phrases, number combinations. A private communication system I had created with Renee when she was 17. Thomas had been mildly amused when I taught her. She's a teenager, not a field operative. Maybe, but I had spent too many years watching situations deteriorate because no one had a signal prepared. So I taught her anyway. One rule above everything else. If you ever send the primary code, I come immediately. No questions, no delay. Renee had rolled her eyes beautifully. "Mom, we live in suburban Georgia." "I know where we live," I'd said. 4 months later, on a Tuesday night in October, my phone buzzed at 11:47. A text from Renee. "Hey Mom, do you still have Grandma's recipe for apple cake? The one with the caramel glaze?" Beneath it, a single word. "Marigold." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. Marigold was the primary code. Immediate danger. Contact police. Come now. I stared at that word for perhaps 3 seconds. Then 28 years of training moved through my body like a current being switched on. Calm, cold, focused, efficient. I stood, walked to the closet in the hallway, reached past the winter coats, and opened the small secured lockbox mounted to the wall. I removed what I needed. Then I picked up my phone and dialed 911 while pulling on my jacket. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? Potential domestic violence in progress, I said, my voice level and unhurried. I'm the victim's mother. I've received a pre-established distress signal. Female victim, male suspect, address is 4417 Briarwood Terrace. Suspect may be intoxicated. A brief pause. Ma'am, are you currently at that location? I'm en route, approximately 9 minutes out. We're dispatching units now. Please wait for officers to arrive before approaching. I understand, I said. Officers will find me on scene. Before she could respond further, I set the phone in the cup holder and pulled out of the driveway. Fear at my age feels nothing like it did when I was young. At 23, fear was loud, heart slamming, hands cold, breath short. At 71, when the thing you fear most involves someone you love, fear arrives as silence. Interior silence, total focus. The world narrows to relevant information only, distance, time, variables, unknowns. I drove through the dark Georgia roads with my headlights cutting through thick October fog. The old familiar sensation of moving toward something dangerous rather than away from it settled over me like a second skin. Some things the body never forgets. I turned onto Briarwood Terrace and pulled to the curb half a house length away, lights off. Every downstairs window in Renee's house was lit. I could hear Marcus from the street, even through closed windows, words indistinct but tone unmistakable. I assessed as I moved across the yard. Side gate open, porch light on, no visible movement in front windows. I am 71 years old. My right knee aches in cold weather. My hands show every decade of their life. I move carefully on wet surfaces, and I need reading glasses for anything smaller than a standard menu. But awareness doesn't age the same way joints do. Neither does timing. Neither does the capacity to remain completely still inside yourself when stillness is the most dangerous thing you can offer. I moved along the side of the house to the back patio. The sliding door was open 3 inches, curtain drifting. Inside, I saw my daughter. Renee was backed against the kitchen island, arms crossed over herself, crying. Her lip was bleeding. Marcus stood inches from her, one hand gripping the counter beside her head, his voice low and vicious in the way that is somehow worse than shouting. You think calling someone helps you. You think anyone is going to believe you over me. Renee turned her face away. He grabbed her chin and turned it back. Something inside me became very quiet. Not angry. People who have never faced genuine danger imagine that protective action comes from rage. It doesn't. Rage is imprecise. What arrived in me instead was the oldest professional reflex I owned. Threat assessment, entry, containment, protection. I slid the door open smoothly and stepped inside. The floor was tile. I moved without sound. Marcus didn't notice me until Renee's eyes shifted past his shoulder. Her breath caught, "Mom." He turned. For one extraordinary moment, he actually smiled. The contemptuous, reflexive smile of a man who has never once been genuinely challenged by anything that frightened him. Well, he said, Dorothy, perfect timing. I kept walking toward him at an even pace. Step away from my daughter. He laughed, spread his hands wide in mock surrender. Oh, okay, here we go, Renee called Mommy. His voice dropped into mockery. What are you going to do, Dorothy? File a report. Step away from her, I won't say it again. Something in my tone finally reached a place beneath his performance. His smile flickered. You're serious? He took 2 steps toward me instead. That was the last decision Marcus Reed made independently for quite some time. The moment his weight shifted forward, I moved. One redirection, one rotation. His momentum used entirely against him. In less than 4 seconds, Marcus was face down on the hardwood floor with his right wrist secured behind his back and my knee positioned precisely between his shoulder blades. He weighed nearly 200 pounds. It did not matter. He bucked hard, twice. I adjusted pressure with the clinical precision of muscle memory that had been installed in my body across nearly 3 decades of professional practice. He gasped, how did you? Stop moving, I said quietly. You're not injured, you're restrained, the difference matters. Get off me, get off. Every time you move, I said calmly, the discomfort will increase. This is your body informing you of the consequence of continued resistance. Please make the reasonable choice. He went partially still, breathing hard, furious, humiliated. Renee stood frozen near the island, with both hands over her mouth. 60 seconds later, the front door opened, and 2 officers entered with weapons drawn. Sheriff's Department, hands where we can see them. Victim secured, I said clearly, raising my left hand while maintaining control with my right. Suspect restrained. No weapons on suspect. I am unarmed. Both officers processed the scene. One moved to cover Marcus. The other, a woman perhaps 15 years my junior with close-cropped hair and a very particular stillness about her, stared at me, not at my face, at my hands, at my positioning, at the complete absence of agitation in my breathing. She looked at me the way military people look at each other. Ma'am, she said carefully, I'm going to need you to step back slowly. Of course. I rose and moved aside with measured, deliberate calm. She continued watching me as her partner secured Marcus in handcuffs. Ma'am, were you in the service? I looked straight ahead. Retired, I said. She nodded once slowly. That was enough. The silence that settles into a house after violence is nothing like ordinary quiet. It has weight, it has texture. It presses against the furniture and sits in the corners and smells faintly like the aftermath of held breath. Renee came home with me that night. She slept in her old room upstairs, the one with the faded lavender walls she'd chosen herself at 15, and the quilt Thomas's mother had sewn from fabric scraps. I hadn't changed anything in that room since she moved out. I told myself it was because I hadn't gotten around to it. I understood now it was because some part of me had always known she might need to come home. The following morning, I woke before 5, as I have every morning since 1978, and made coffee in the dark kitchen while Biscuit clicked across the tile beside me. Renee appeared in the doorway at 6:30, wearing an old sweatshirt of mine from years ago, her hair loose, her eyes carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has not slept, but has finally, for the first time in a long time, felt safe enough to stop pretending to be fine. She poured herself coffee without speaking, sat down across from me, looked at the table. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? For all of this. I set my mug down. You have nothing to apologize for. She shook her head, tears gathered quickly. I should have left earlier. I should have said something sooner. I should have. Renee. She stopped. Fear keeps people in dangerous places far longer than it should. That is not a character failure. That is the nature of fear. She looked down, a tear fell onto the table. I didn't want you to think I was weak. 28 years of operational service. 17 countries. Situations I am still not permitted to discuss in full. And somehow, sitting in my own kitchen at 5:30 in the morning, that sentence from my daughter hit harder than almost anything I had survived in any of those places. Because I recognized what lived underneath it. She hadn't only been afraid of Marcus. She had been afraid of disappointing me. I have to tell the truth about something, because honesty is the only thing I know how to offer now. I was not always an easy mother. Military discipline is a gift in a crisis and a complicated thing in a family. After Thomas died, I managed grief the way I had been professionally trained to manage difficulty. I stayed busy. I stayed productive. I kept moving. What I did not do was let my daughter see me grieve. I thought I was modeling strength. What Renee experienced was distance. The particular loneliness of a daughter whose mother was physically present but emotionally sealed. Children notice these things. Adult children notice them differently, but just as deeply. And sometimes, Women who grow up feeling quietly unseen by the people they most admire find themselves drawn to men who offer intense, consuming attention, even when that attention is not safe. I am not assigning blame for what Marcus did. That belongs entirely to him. But I can carry my own portion of the truth. I should have been softer. I should have shown her more of what lived beneath the discipline. I should have said I'm lost without your father instead of painting the garage and reorganizing the pantry and pretending that movement was the same as living. On a gray November morning 6 weeks later, a detective named Pauline Marsh sat at my kitchen table with a folder of documentation and the quiet, unhurried manner of someone who has handled many cases like this one and understood their full weight. Renee sat beside me, hands wrapped around a mug. We've collected physical evidence, medical records, and testimony from 2 neighbors who report hearing altercations on multiple occasions, Detective Marsh said. The case is strong. Renee was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and placed a small digital recorder on the table. There's this, she said softly. Detective Marsh looked at it. What's on it? 18 months of recordings. Renee's voice was almost apologetic. I started keeping them after the first time he shoved me. I didn't know if anyone would believe me without proof. The detective picked it up carefully. We listened to 30 seconds of the first recording together. Marcus's voice, glass-breaking, Renee crying, and then one sentence, quiet and cold, that made my jaw tight. If you ever go to your mother, I'll make sure she finds out what you really are. And I'll make sure she's sorry she got involved. Detective Marsh removed her earpiece slowly. She looked at Renee. You kept these for 18 months. Renee nodded, bracing. That took courage, the detective said simply. Something visibly shifted in my daughter's face, as though a long-held breath had finally, carefully, been released. I did not expect to wear my dress uniform again. I had put it away after my retirement ceremony and not opened the garment bag since. At my age, I had assumed it would remain in the attic until someone else had the task of deciding what to do with it. But the preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in late November. And I woke that day before dawn and stood in my closet for a long moment, and then I climbed the attic stairs. The uniform still fit. Not as it once had, 15 pounds of different life distributed differently, but it fit. I pinned each medal carefully. I attached my rank insignia. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment and saw something I had nearly forgotten was still there. Not the woman I had been. The woman I had always been. When I walked into the courthouse, the conversations in the hall didn't stop dramatically the way they do in films, but people noticed. A quiet ripple of attention followed me through the corridor. An older veteran near the door stood slightly straighter as I passed. In the courtroom, Renee stared at me. You never wear that, she whispered. I know. You look, she paused, different. No, I said quietly. I think I look exactly the same, you're just seeing more of it. Marcus, seated beside his attorney, went visibly still when I entered. Something crossed his face that I had not seen there before in all the years I had known him. Something close to genuine fear. Not because of violence. He had already seen what I was capable of and knew it was controlled. Because he had built an entire image of me in his mind. The soft, quiet older woman, the harmless mother-in-law, the background figure, and that image was now standing in front of him in full military dress with 30 years of history pinned to her chest, and there was nowhere left to put it. The man he had dismissed entirely had never existed. When the judge asked if I wished to make a statement before sentencing, I stood slowly. Every joint reminded me of my age. My knee, my right shoulder, the particular morning stiffness that has been arriving with more authority each winter. My voice did not waver. I've spent the majority of my adult life in proximity to conflict, I said. In that time, I came to understand one thing very clearly. The courtroom was quiet. Power is not the ability to make someone afraid of you. Anyone with sufficient cruelty can accomplish that. I looked briefly toward Marcus. Power is the capacity to protect people who cannot, in that moment, protect themselves. Several people in the gallery were very still. I'm not asking this court for vengeance. I've seen what vengeance costs in lives, in years, in the things you carry home afterward. A pause. I'm asking for accountability, for my daughter, for anyone else who might have been next. I sat down. Renee's hand found mine under the table. The sentencing included prison time, mandatory counseling, domestic violence rehabilitation, and a permanent protective order. As officers prepared to escort Marcus from the courtroom, he stopped in the aisle. He looked toward Renee with an expression I had not expected. Not the contempt he had worn like a second skin for 4 years, not performance, something stripped and raw and genuinely broken. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was quiet. "Renee, I'm sorry." She did not answer. She held my hand and watched him go. And for the first time since she was 17 years old and rolling her eyes at distress codes in the kitchen, the fear that had lived so long in my daughter's eyes was entirely, completely gone. Winter moved through slowly, the way it does when you are learning how to breathe again. By January, Renee had found a small house rental on the east side of town near the park, where she used to ride her bike as a child. Modest, well-lit, a garden that needed attention. She threw herself into that garden with the particular energy of a person rediscovering that she is allowed to want things. She started teaching art classes 2 afternoons a week at the community center. She called me every morning. Sometimes we talked for an hour. Sometimes we sat on the phone in companionable quiet, just present. It was more than we had managed in years. As for me, I stopped treating solitude as a virtue. I joined the county veterans support group that met on Thursday evenings at the church hall. I started walking with a neighbor, a retired teacher named Gwendolyn, 3 mornings a week. I had people for dinner. I let Biscuit sleep on the bed, which Thomas had always wanted me to allow and I had always pretended to resist. Small things, ordinary things. Peace, I had learned long ago, is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of enough stability and love that difficulty can be survived without destroying you. One Sunday in early spring, Renee brought my granddaughter Lily over for dinner. Lily was 8, bright-eyed, gap-toothed, endlessly curious. She ran through my back garden with Biscuit in circles while Renee and I sat on the porch steps watching. "Grandma," Lily called out, breathless. "Mama says you were in the army." "Navy," I called back. "Did you fight bad guys?" I considered this. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly I kept good people safe." She absorbed this seriously. Then she ran back across the grass and threw her arms around my neck with the full-bodied commitment only an 8-year-old can manage. "I'm glad you're strong," she whispered into my shoulder. I held her carefully. Thought about all the years I had spent keeping that strength invisible, contained, tucked away where it would not unsettle anyone. Thought about how much it had cost all of us. "So am I, sweetheart," I said quietly. "So am I." On an evening in late May, Renee arrived at my door holding an envelope. No return address, a facility postmark. "Marcus." We sat together at the kitchen table while I opened it. The letter was handwritten, careful, no excuses offered, an acknowledgement of specific things he had done, named plainly without softening language. A statement that he was working through a program and understood that working through a program was not the same as being owed forgiveness. One paragraph near the end read, "I spent years believing that controlling someone was the same as loving them. I know now that I never understood what love actually requires of a person. I'm sorry for what I cost Renee. I'm sorry for what I said and thought about you. You were right to protect her. You were right about everything, I just wasn't capable of seeing it." Renee read over my shoulder. When I set the letter down, she was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think genuine remorse is one of the most painful things a person can feel," I said, "and I think the letter sounds genuine." She nodded slowly. "I'm not ready to forgive him." "That's yours to decide, at your pace, in your time." She looked at me. "Are you?" I folded the letter carefully along its original creases. "I'm practicing," I said honestly. She almost smiled at that. Then she leaned over and rested her head against my shoulder, the way she had not done since she was very small, and the kitchen was quiet around us, and Biscuit snored softly near the back door, and outside the window the spring garden Renee had helped me plant in March was turning green. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming." "Always," I said, "for you, always." I spent most of my life believing that strength looked like self-sufficiency, like silence, like never needing anything from anyone. War taught me that strength means surviving what breaks other people. Loss taught me that strength means continuing when you cannot imagine how. But it took my daughter sending a single coded word into the dark of an October night to teach me what I should have understood from the very beginning. The greatest act of strength I ever performed was not in any classified location, in any foreign country, in any year I am forbidden to speak of. It was answering a phone. It was driving through the dark toward someone who was afraid. It was being the person she trusted enough to call. Strength is not silence. Strength is not distance. Strength is not the careful management of every emotion until nothing leaks through and nothing reaches anyone. Strength is being present, being reachable, being the one who comes. If you have someone in your life who is afraid, be the person they can call. Build that trust long before the crisis arrives. And if you have hidden pieces of yourself away to protect others from the weight of who you are, consider that the people who love you might not need protection from you. They might simply need you. All of you. It is never too late to offer that. Not even at 71.